Have you ever wondered why this woman? Why does she trigger you so deeply, make your heart race, or drive you insane? What if your partner isn't just your lover, but a mirror of your deepest, darkest shadow self, chosen by your psyche for a shocking reason you're about to discover? In his own marriage and therapeutic practice, Carl Jung encountered profound truth that your romantic partner is never random. She is precisely the person your unconscious has chosen to help you confront your unresolved complexes and integrate your shadow material. You're not just dating her. You're living with your psyche's chosen guide to confront the parts of yourself you refuse to face. The more intense your connection, the more likely it is that your psyche has selected this particular person to serve as your guide to the territories of yourself that you have not yet explored. Jung said, "Your partner is your psyche's mirror, reflecting back what you cannot see." That intense connection, it's no accident. Your unconscious picked her to challenge you, to push you toward wholeness. Every argument, every trigger, every moment of passion is your psyche's laboratory for transformation. But here's the catch. If you don't understand this hidden dynamic, you'll stay trapped in a projection prison cycle, repeating the same painful patterns forever. What if one secret Jung discovered could turn your most triggering partner into your greatest spiritual teacher? Stick around, because this psychological principle will change how you see your relationship forever. There are millions of people in relationships around the world who think they know their partners. Some see their beloved as a companion. Some view them as a source of happiness. Some hope for compatibility, while others search for someone who completes them. In a world that sees relationships as partnerships for mutual support, why do the deepest connections often feel like psychological battlegrounds? And how can you recognize when your partner is not just your lover, but your psyche's chosen guide for your journey to wholeness? You have a desire to understand your deepest relationships. You want to know why this person triggers you, why this connection feels so intense, why this relationship challenges you so profoundly. These questions were the heart of the revolutionary work of Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychologist who discovered the hidden psychological destiny behind your most significant relationships. Despite the common belief that your partner should make your life easier, Jung revealed a shocking truth about what your intimate relationships are actually designed to do. And he showed his patients that your partner is not just your companion. She is your shadow, your challenge, your unconscious guide to becoming who you were meant to be. Jung said, your partner is your psyche's mirror, reflecting back the parts of yourself you cannot see. She embodies your unintegrated complexes and carries projections of your inner world. He believed that your most intimate relationship is actually your psyche's chosen laboratory for individuation. And if you could understand the deeper psychological purpose behind your connection, you would discover the secret to transforming conflict into consciousness. Jung had experienced the psychological destiny firsthand in his relationship with his wife, Emma, and his profound connection with Tony Wolfe, and had witnessed it in countless patients who discovered that their relationship conflicts were actually invitations to psychological growth. He developed a revolutionary understanding of how your partner functions as your living anima, the feminine principle within your psyche that guides you toward wholeness. And the insights he gained would transform how you understand the deeper purpose behind every argument, every trigger, and every moment of relational friction. In 1903, Carl Jung married Emma Rauschenbach and immediately discovered that his wife was not just his beloved. She was a psychological teacher, reflecting back parts of his personality he had never acknowledged. Jung found himself reacting to Emma in ways that revealed his own unintegrated shadow material and unresolved father and mother complexes. The woman he thought he had chosen for love had actually been chosen by his unconscious for psychological development. Every conflict with Emma brought to the surface aspects of his personality that he had repressed or denied, and every moment of harmony showed him qualities he needed to integrate within himself. And as he studied the patterns of his own marriage, he realized that your intimate relationships are not accidents. They are assignments from your unconscious designed to accelerate your journey towards psychological wholeness. This discovery would lead to his groundbreaking theory about the psychological purpose of marriage and intimate partnership. This understanding was based on Jung's revolutionary concept of psychological projection. At a time when people saw relationship conflicts as incompatibility problems, Jung argued that what you experience in your relationship is actually a reflection of your own inner dynamics projected onto your partner. He believed that you don't just fall in love with a person. You fall in love with your own unconscious material that this person carries for you. Your partner becomes a living embodiment of your inner feminine, your anima, which serves as your guide to parts of yourself you have not yet discovered or integrated. And slowly, Jung realized that what looked like relationship drama was actually your psyche's attempt to heal itself through the mirror of intimate connection. In his practice, Jung had found not only couples fighting with each other, but also individuals fighting with projected aspects of themselves that their partners were carrying for them. The man who is triggered by his wife's emotional expression is actually being challenged to integrate his own repressed feelings. The husband who criticizes his partner's creativity is confronting his own undeveloped artistic potential. The person who judges their beloved's vulnerability is meeting their own disowned sensitivity. These weren't relationship problems. They were individuation opportunities disguised as conflicts. Jung's theory seemed radical to everything people had been taught about love and compatibility. But there was mounting evidence that your most challenging relationship dynamics are actually your psyche's way of bringing unconscious material to the surface for integration. For Jung, your partner is not meant to make you happy. She is meant to make you whole. Jung was revolutionary in recognizing that relationship conflict is often a sign that psychological growth is trying to occur. He understood that nothing reveals your unconscious patterns faster than intimate partnership. Jung spoke about this dynamic in his writings on marriage psychology. Marriage is a psychological laboratory where your unconscious complexes come to light, he observed. Your partner doesn't create your triggers. She reveals the triggers that were already there, waiting to be healed. Jung's theories on the psychological purpose of partnership were particularly challenging to the romantic ideals of his time. While most people believe that your partner should complement your personality and avoid conflict, Jung believed that your most significant relationship would inevitably challenge your ego and force you to confront the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. Society said, in effect, love should be easy, and Jung said, love should be transformative. And this fundamental difference revolutionized how people could understand the deeper purpose of their most difficult relationship moments. When Jung first published his theories on marriage as a path to individuation in the 1920s, they challenged everything people thought they knew about romantic compatibility. Some saw him as a wise guide who had discovered the secret to transforming relationship conflict into conscious growth. Others as a pessimistic analyst who was destroying the romance and joy of love. Jung's romantic contemporaries completely rejected the idea that your partner was meant to challenge rather than comfort you. Popular culture wasn't ready for suggestion that your beloved might actually be your unconscious therapist in disguise. Though his theories were controversial, they resonated deeply with those who had experienced the profound growth that comes from working through relationship challenges rather than running from them. The psychologically mature recognized the wisdom in Jung's approach, even when the romantically naive couldn't understand it. Jung would spend decades helping couples understand the deeper psychological purpose of their conflicts and teaching them how to use their relationship as a crucible for individuation. But the years of challenging society's romantic myths would set him apart from popular relationship advice. Just as Jung had predicted, his own willingness to use his marriage for psychological development rather than just emotional comfort had prepared him for a lifetime of helping others transform their relationships from sources of drama into paths of wisdom. As the world entered the challenging period of the Great Depression, Jung found that his understanding of relationship as individuation tool was more relevant than ever. He worked with couples who were facing unprecedented stress and discovered that those who understood their partnership as a psychological laboratory could use even the most difficult times to deepen their connection and accelerate their individual growth. From his crisis counseling emerged deeper insights into how relationship conflict actually serves the individuation process when properly understood and engaged with. Determined to understand the 6 key ways your partner serves as your psychological guide, Jung began mapping the specific processes through which intimate relationships facilitate individuation. The first process he identified was the law of psychological projection, the way you unconsciously project your inner world onto your partner, seeing inner qualities that actually exist within your own psyche. Jung discovered that what you love and hate most about your partner are often reflections of your own unconscious material that you haven't yet integrated. The second process involves the archetypal role of the Anima as your guide to the self, the way your partner embodies a feminine principle within your psyche that connects you to your creativity, intuition, and emotional depth. The third process shows how marriage reveals your hidden complexes, the way relationship friction brings your unintegrated psychological patterns to the surface where they can be seen and healed. The fourth process demonstrates seeing marriage as a path to individuation, understanding why the union of two people creates the ultimate crucible for psychological wholeness and authentic self-discovery. The fifth process explores when she becomes your living anima, learning to recognize how your partner helps you integrate your inner feminine, leading to personal balance and completion. The sixth and final process maps the path from complex-driven relationship to psychological wholeness, discovering how to transform conflict into an opportunity for growth and liberation from unconscious patterns. As he studied deeper into psychology of partnership, Jung became convinced that your most intimate relationship is actually your individuation process disguised as a love story. Your partner carries exactly the qualities you need to develop within yourself, and your relationship conflicts highlight precisely the areas where your psychological growth is needed. He found that when couples learn to see their triggers as invitations to consciousness rather than evidence of incompatibility, their relationships became powerful vehicles for mutual transformation. These are individuals who understand that your partner is your unconscious therapist. They're the ones who learn to ask, what is this conflict trying to teach me about myself? Rather than, how can I change my partner? Jung concluded that your most challenging relationship is actually your psyche's greatest gift to your development. The person who triggers you most is often the one carrying the key to your next level of consciousness and wholeness. He called this process conscious relationship and believed it was a secret to transforming partnership from a source of drama into a pathway to liberation. Every person has a capacity to recognize their partner as their psychological guide and use their relationship as a tool for individuation and self-discovery. You can recognize someone who understands this deeper purpose by their ability to take responsibility for their reactions rather than blaming their partner. You can recognize them by their capacity to find growth opportunities within relationship conflicts rather than seeing them as evidence of incompatibility, or by their gift for appreciating their partner's challenging qualities as invitations to develop those same qualities within themselves. These are universal principles of conscious relationship. They appear in every wisdom tradition, every culture, in different forms but with the same essential understanding. My partner is my mirror, not my enemy. Even in modern relationship therapy, once therapists help couples understand Jung's approach to relationship as individuation tool, they can better support the transformation of conflict into consciousness. When you see a couple who has learned to use their triggers as doorways to self-discovery, you recognize the shift immediately. There's that immediate sense of depth and authenticity that comes from people who are using their relationship for psychological development rather than just emotional gratification. The whole idea of conscious partnership and the concept of relationship as individuation path, these are ancient wisdom principles that Jung brought into modern relationship psychology. In the real world, many of you are unconsciously caught in these patterns of projection and blame. The person who criticizes their partner for qualities they haven't developed in themselves. The individual who expects a beloved to heal wounds that only they can heal. The romantic who wants their partner to be perfect rather than whole. But often, you don't recognize that your relationship conflicts are actually your unconscious trying to guide you toward greater self-awareness. Most people spend years trying to change their partners instead of using their partner's challenging qualities as mirrors for their own psychological growth. Jung stressed that in order to transform your relationship from a battleground into a sacred laboratory, you must learn to take responsibility for your projections and see your partner's most triggering qualities as invitations to develop those same qualities within yourself. I think every person who has been deeply triggered by their partner knows that the trigger reveals something important about their own psyche. When you learn to ask, what is my partner teaching me about myself? Instead of, why is my partner doing this to me? Your relationship becomes a pathway to freedom. For years, Jung himself had struggled with the tendency to blame his wife for triggering his unconscious patterns rather than taking responsibility for his own psychological material. He had exhausted himself trying to change Emma's behavior instead of using her challenging qualities as opportunities to develop greater self-awareness and emotional maturity. After his breakthrough understanding of relationship as individuation tool, Carl Jung had discovered the secret to transforming any partnership into a vehicle for mutual consciousness and growth. Seeing your partner as your psychological guide became the foundation of Jung's approach to marriage counseling, and as the world struggled with high divorce rates and widespread relationship dysfunction, society began to embrace Jung's revolutionary ideas about the deeper purpose of intimate partnership. When he published his comprehensive theory of relationship psychology in the 1930s, IT became essential reading for anyone serious about conscious love. In The Psychology of Marriage, Jung offered a complete framework that would help you understand the 6 processes through which your intimate relationship serves your individuation journey. He explained how someone who blames their partner for relationship problems remains trapped in unconscious patterns, while someone who takes responsibility for their projections discovers the freedom that comes from conscious relationship. Jung called this transformation individuation through partnership. Individuation through partnership helps explain why some couples grow more conscious together, while others repeat the same conflicts endlessly, why some relationships deepen with time, while others deteriorate under weight of unexamined projections. For those struggling with relationship conflicts and wondering why their partner triggers them so intensely, discovering Jung's understanding of partnership as psychological laboratory became a life-changing revelation. And around the world, couples began learning to transform their conflicts into opportunities for mutual growth. At the age of 65, Carl Jung had become the leading authority on the psychology of conscious relationship and the role of partnership in individuation. And couples seeking to understand the deeper purpose behind their conflicts were coming from every continent to learn his revolutionary approach. He had more people wanting to understand relationship as psychological laboratory than he could work with. Everyone wanted to learn how to transform conflict into consciousness. Marriage counselors and relationship therapists and spiritual teachers of all kinds were drawn to his approach. And they had clients struggling with recurring relationship patterns or questions about the purpose of relationship conflict or challenges with taking responsibility for projections. They found their answers in Jung's profound understanding of partnership as individuation tool. But Jung's theories about your partner as your psychological guide didn't come without their share of criticism from romantic idealists. In the 1940s, some critics argued that Jung's approach would make relationships too analytical and remove the spontaneous joy of love. They believed that seeing your partner as your psychological teacher would create distance rather than intimacy. This created tension between those who wanted relationships to be primarily sources of happiness and those who understood them as opportunities for consciousness development. But Jung maintained that conscious relationship actually creates deeper intimacy than unconscious romance because it's based on genuine seeing rather than projection and fantasy. Jung felt that when you learn to appreciate your partner as your psychological guide, you could experience levels of authentic connection and mutual growth that purely romantic relationships could never achieve. But popular culture continued to promote the myth that love should be effortless, and Jung's more mature approach to relationship was often misunderstood as overly complex. At the time, the entertainment industry was increasingly romanticizing passionate but unconscious relationships, and Jung's emphasis on psychological responsibility seemed demanding compared to fantasy of effortless love. So Jung faced criticism from those who preferred romantic fantasy to psychological reality from the 1930s onward, even though his approach was creating stronger, more authentic partnerships for those who understood it. Over the years, Jung continued to refine his understanding of the 6 processes of relationship as individuation tool and work with couples who wanted to transform their conflicts into consciousness. But mainstream culture remained largely attached to unconscious romantic ideals. Toward the end of his life, Jung focused on training therapists who could help couples recognize their projections and use their relationships as laboratories for psychological development. A true depth psychologist in the end, he spent his final years writing about the sacred art of conscious partnership, Surrounded by students who understood that your most intimate relationship is your greatest opportunity for individuation and self-discovery. When his followers urged Jung to create training programs specifically focused on his approach to relationship as psychological laboratory, Jung was initially reluctant. He had always encouraged people to discover their own authentic way of using their partnerships for growth rather than following prescribed relationship formulas. He didn't want his understanding of conscious relationship to become another technique that people use to try to control or perfect their partnerships. He wanted it to emerge naturally from genuine commitment to psychological development. But he realized that people needed guidance in distinguishing between healthy relationship challenge and unconscious drama. And he felt a responsibility to share what could transform so many partnerships from sources of suffering into pathways of liberation. Eventually, training programs in Jungian relationship psychology appeared from Zurich and Vienna to New York and Los Angeles. Jung himself spent his final years teaching and writing, ensuring that his understanding of your partner as your psychological guide would continue to help couples transform their relationships long after his death. He died peacefully in 1961, having demonstrated through his own marriage that when you see your partner as your shadow, your challenge, and your guide, your relationship becomes a sacred pathway to wholeness. He was 85 years old. Despite his preference for individual psychological work, a movement definitely developed around Carl Jung's teachings on conscious relationship after his death. With the rise of transpersonal psychology and conscious relationship movements came a whole new generation that was ready to embrace Jung's message about the psychological purpose of intimate partnership. The concept of relationship as individuation tool he pioneered became central to understanding how your most challenging connections actually serve your highest psychological development. He felt that humanity was evolving beyond unconscious romantic projection toward conscious partnership, that your understanding of what relationships are was changing fundamentally. He had a sense that people were going to discover profound growth that comes from using their partnerships as mirrors for self-discovery rather than sources of validation. More recently, Jung's original work on the 6 processes of relationship as psychological laboratory led to perhaps his most practical legacy in modern couples therapy, approaches that help you recognize your projections, take responsibility for your triggers, and use your relationship conflicts as doorways to greater self-awareness. These methods help therapists guide couples through the process of transforming unconscious drama into conscious growth. It took decades for mainstream relationship counseling to recognize what Jung understood from the beginning, that your partner's most challenging qualities are often precisely what your psyche needs for its next stage of development. Every year, millions of couples discover that learning to see their beloved as their psychological guide transforms a relationship from a battleground into a sanctuary of mutual growth. Carl Jung was ahead of his time in recognizing that your most intimate relationship is actually your individuation process disguised as a love story. Today, decades after his death, his revolutionary understanding of your partner as your shadow, your challenge, and your guide is now foundational to many forms of conscious relationship work and depth-oriented couples therapy. Jung's insights remain relevant because they address the fundamental human opportunity to use your closest relationships for psychological development and spiritual growth rather than just emotional gratification. We are a culture that is slowly learning to distinguish between unconscious romantic projection and conscious partnership, between expecting your partner to heal you and using your partnership to heal yourself. And Jung's core understanding that your partner is not just your lover, but your psyche's chosen guide for your journey to wholeness, is now part of the wisdom of anyone serious about transforming their relationship into a path of consciousness and authentic self-discovery. In this way, Carl Jung's recognition of the psychological purpose of intimate partnership has become part of our collective understanding of conscious love. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is learning to see your partner not as your completion, but as your consciousness teacher." And perhaps that's the most important lesson Jung's work can teach you about relationships. When you recognize that she is not just your partner, but your shadow, your challenge, and your guide, your love becomes a sacred journey of mutual awakening that transforms both souls in ways that neither could achieve alone.